Kenko Hacks, a podcast about wellness, health, and biohacking.
Today's guest is Dr. Marina Martini-Cavour, Head of Corporate Communications at Genos, company who specializes in researching complex molecules called Glycans. Genos is the global leader in glycan researches and its impacts on our health. I'm really excited to learn more about glycans and how they can help us to optimize our health. Marina, thank you so much for speaking to us today, and welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Since glycan may not be so familiar to many of our audiences, let me start by asking what glycans are.
So, glycans are, it is just a fancy word for something that everyone is familiar with, and those are actually carbohydrates. And glycans are just simply complex carbohydrates, which are building all of these chains that you can imagine kind of like trees, or, like trees that are built from different blocks. And then they build one upon each other and create these complex structures that decorate a lot of the proteins and basically almost all cells in our bodies. So they can be found ubiquitously in the nature, and especially in our bodies. They're very, very important for instance, communication between cells, for communication between molecules, and for modulating different functions and different processes, bodily processes.
So there are many glycans in our body, is that correct?
Yes. Really a lot of the glycans in our body. They're not so simple. For instance, like, proteins can be read directly from the DNA template. But for glycans, there is not a straightforward template. They're kind of combined. There are many genes regulating them, and the complexity of glycans is huge when you compare it, to the complexity of, for instance, amino acids or the basis of the DNA. So already there you have, a very, very difficult task. And this is also the reason why glycans are not so familiar today or so, popular, because, for science, we really needed to get to a point where methods can, untangle these very, very complex molecules, and where the methods are able to tell us a little bit more about them, and what kind of different molecules there are, and what do different molecules modulate, what do they do. So we're still very much in the business of uncovering the human glycome. We only tapped into a surface of it. But when it comes to the IgG glycosylation, which are glycans attached to the most prevalent antibody in human blood, there, Genos has done a lot of work in the last, now it's even over the last 10 years. And we are really on top here when it comes to the research in uncovering the glycans of both human plasma and specifically immunoglobulin G.
Right. So today, there are lots of glycans in our whole body, but today we are going to focus on probably on the immunoglycans.
Yes.
And what are immunoglycans? Could you maybe please elaborate?
So specifically, we're going to focus on glycans attached to the immunoglobulin G. So immunoglobulin G is the antibody in our blood. It is the most prevalent antibody in our blood. And you can imagine it, and it's often drawn as this Y-shaped molecule. Now, if you imagine this shape of the Y, so the glycans would actually be attached somewhere, here, kind of like in the middle of this Y, holding two pieces together. So glycans would be in the middle. Yeah. And this is very important because then, if you have something here in the middle, this can determine, how the entire molecule looks and behaves. And this is, just one of the subgroups of glycans that can be attached to this molecule. There can also be some on the top and so on. But these in the middle are the ones which are, about which we know the most so far. And it is the fact, and we know it now from many, many, many research studies, that in fact, just a simple change of these glycans on this immunoglobulin G molecule can determine how this molecule both looks and how it behaves. So it can determine, for instance, which partners is this molecule going to, interact with, or how is it going to interact with those partners in the cascade of the immunological system, and, a certain response to something like an outside stimulus, for instance, bacteria or a virus, and so on and so on. And it can shift the activity of this immunoglobulin G more towards the pro-inflammatory. So this would be, strong response to something that triggered this reaction, or it can be more anti-inflammatory, and this would be, like calming down the reaction. And the fact is, we basically need both functions. We need them both. However, they need to be tightly balanced. And there is this, theory through which this reactivity of the immune system is connected to the aging. And this theory is called inflammaging. So the more of the inflammation you have in your body, so this background level of inflammation, and anything that you meet in life can cause, an increase in this background level of inflammation. For instance, if you have had a lot of the diseases, so when you were a child, maybe, your body is more pro-inflammatory than if you didn't have them, or if you're leading a certain lifestyle, maybe this lifestyle is increasing this background level of the inflammation in your body. And, this is where there is this tight connection between glycans and the immunological system and the aging, because the immune system is the one which, keeps your bodies functioning when they meet a certain danger from the inside, or even from the inside or outside. For instance, immune system is the first one reacting to things like cancer. Immune system is in the background of autoimmune diseases. Immune system is defending you from, bacteria and viruses. So, this is why the glycans play a central role here, because they are determining how these antibodies are going to behave when they meet a certain situation.
Yeah. Do we know approximately how many immunoglobulin glycans do we have in our body?
How many immunoglobulin G glycans you mean in our blood?
Yes. Yes.
So we have, I think, roughly around definitely over 30 structures in our blood. But I'm not 100% sure that we've determined absolutely all of the glycans, that glycan structures that can be present on immunoglobulin G. You need to combine methods to detach those glycans and then to determine their structure. So you need a combination of different complex methods. And as the methods are getting better and better, maybe we will be catching more and more of these structures for which we didn't know about before. But right now, I can tell you that it's, over 30 structures, and some of these structures are very, very strongly prevalent. A lot of the immunoglobulin G molecules are going to carry these structures, and some of these structures can maybe be present on a very, very small subset of immunoglobulin G. But this is going to be different between different people.
Yeah. So, but so GlycanAge, that's a specific test a company also called GlycanAge is offering for consumers. And then I assume that the GlycanAge is testing is a part of a subset of immunoglobulin G glycans. Is that correct?
So we actually, in the test, we give you your entire profile. So you can see, specifically your entire profile as, determined by the method which we're using for GlycanAge. So you get the full information about, all the IgG all the peaks of the IgG glycans that we've determined. However, we do use, specific patented statistical methods and statistical tests to determine from a subset of all these glycans, which we found are the best correlated with biological aging and the inflammation. So you get the full information about your profile, but then we're focusing on what we found is the most significant part of it in this context.
Yeah, so that really sounds interesting, and that really was, I think, why glycans can be so interesting to me and the audiences. So I think biological age, the concept of biological age is it's not new, and there are several tests in the market already today which claim to measure one's biological age, including glycogen. And but there's no gold standard for biological age measurement. For example, I actually have been following blood markers. So there are certain blood markers based, and there is actually on the internet you can input your blood markers and get biological age back. There is telomere, and there is also epigenetic clocks, several of them. So how do they? So when we come to this biological age measurement, you already mentioned the immunoglobulin G-based glycans and how they can be correlated with our biological age. But can you elaborate a little bit more how glycans can be correlated to our biological age, and how we can measure our biological age based on some of the glycans?
Yeah, so I mean, it comes back to this inflammaging theory that I mentioned. As you said yourself, there is no golden standard. So right now, the entire field is, searching for what is called this, like a holy grail of biological aging, and there are some plus sides and some minus sides to all of them, right? But IgG glycans have been, indicated as a possible future, or maybe even now, holy grail of the biological age measuring. And there's actually a very, very recent study. It's still a preprint, which was done by a group of scientists from University of Edinburgh. And they compared 9 biological age estimators. And there was, as you mentioned, epigenetic aging. There were different metabolomics clocks, megaomics, and so on and so on. And what they concluded was that the epigenetic and IgG glycomic clocks appear to track generalized aging, while the other clocks seem to be, like more specific for certain, problems and issues. And there was this huge difference between, for instance, biological age estimators that were more strongly correlated with the chronological age, such as MS metabolomics. But IgG glycomics correlated more with things like hospital admissions. So, it was better at estimating, as a being potential prognostic marker for earlier development of aging-related diseases and states and issues. Now, the only other measure which showed similar properties, out of those 9 examined, was the epigenetic clock. So, however, with epigenetic measures of biological aging, there are also these questions of since you're measuring from blood, right? How well does epigenetic
Yes.
aging of the cells from your blood actually correlate with epigenetic aging of the cells in your other organs and tissues? And how well does this epigenetic change translate to translation, or the reading of the protein molecule, which is then going to affect the process of aging. So it is still very unclear and very vague, this whole theoretical approach afterwards. What happens, how does this epigenetic change actually affect aging, and how does it affect it in different organs and tissues? And with IgG, here we have enough data so far that we can actually say, yes, these changes in IgG glycosylation actually affect the effector function of this IgG, and we know that this is going to be, changed and different in certain, diseases and disease states. For instance, like rheumatoid arthritis, like diabetes, like cardiometabolic, diseases, and we have a correlation, a clear correlation there. And one other thing which has been at least a big difference so far is that, for instance, with the epigenetic aging, there have been some papers showing that you can change your epigenetic age, but again, exactly how and what, it is rather unclear if this is something that is, directly applicable for, general masses which just want to change their lifestyle without being fed a specific type of substance or something like that. While with GlycanAge, we were able to show that, simple interventions, for instance, like hormonal treatments in menopausal women, or things like losing weight in excessively overweight people, so either by diet or by bariatric surgery, that this can actually completely change their profile of glycans. And even things like exercise and diet, though there we're still very much, in the middle of the field, we're still very much trying to discover what exactly types of changes have the most drastic effect. But there are some things, for instance, like hormones and weight loss and things like that, for which we can definitely say, yes, there is a definitely observable effect that we can see with those. Those are actually very simple, interventions. You don't need to eat a specific type of, supplement or something like that to see a change. It's something very...
Yes, lifestyle interventions.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. It is very, very interesting. I think it's so just to make maybe draw a whole picture. So GlycanAge. If I am consumer wanting to take a GlycanAge testing, and I obviously order the test kit. And is it a saliva test, or what is a sample type?
It's a blood test, because so IgG, there is a different type of antibody which is more present in saliva, and we're looking at this IgG which is more present in your blood. But it's you just get this kit, which you can also use at home, and you have this just small needle with which you just prick your finger, and we only need 4 drops of blood. That's it. No more than 4 drops of blood. And then, you can send this to us, and that's basically it. We don't need more than 4 drops of blood to be able to determine it.
Yeah, I have done a similar test before. It was for omega-3/6 balance, and it was, even though it was a blood test, I got a kit at home, and I was able to prick my finger by myself. It was also 4 drops, I would recall, and then I sent back the sheet with blood, and then I get the result. So it sounds very similar in that way. So you already mentioned that some simple interventions, like maybe exercises or hormonal intervention, you mentioned they definitely affect your GlycanAge in a positive way. And if you go to GlycanAge website, I can see people's picture with their GlycanAge and the real chronological age, and that's very fascinating to see. Some of the people are like almost 50 but has GlycanAge of 20, and others vice versa. Maybe they can be 50 but 70 of GlycanAge, and very fascinating to see that how quickly so GlycanAge can change. So, for example, I have been doing blood marker-based testing and calculating biological age based on some blood markers like fasting blood glucose or C-reactive protein and a couple of other things. And they change quite rapidly. I have noticed. Once I took blood tests in 10 days interval and the same blood test, and they calculated my biological age in twice within 10 days window, and I was amazed to see that how different it could be. And so they do change quite quickly. Some of them, of course, remain stable more or less, but even value like a homocysteine, for example, they could double within 10 days window, I have noticed. What is about GlycanAge?
So, well, GlycanAge is much slower than that, but there is a catch in all of this. So, if we're talking about, let's say, lifestyle change, something like changing a diet, changing an exercise routine, and things like that, we would need, I think, at least 1 month to see some real difference. And this is partly limited due to, the turnover time that is required for these molecules in your blood to be replaced by the new ones. So at least something like a month, but we see some drastic changes, let's say after 3 months or 6 months, or, the real drastic changes we've seen in the time span of 1 year. However, if we're talking about, something like a massive acute change, for instance, like a surgery or like a septic shock or a very strong pneumonia, then we will see this very bad changing glycans happening, very drastically, because then, your body is, producing strong immunological response to whatever is happening, and then this whole, profile of glycans is going to change very, very rapidly. So while there is potential for a very rapid change, we see in the research that we've done so far that typically the response to things like lifestyle changes is slower. And I think this is also something that's mentioned a lot, that, in order to see the real effect of all of these changes, you really need to stick to them for a longer time. You might have some, acute change of some markers or some, blood molecules, which might have a short-term effect. But if you want to really change your biological aging or make it slower, then what you need to do is you need to stick to this process for a longer time, and only then will the real effects start being visible throughout your body, So it can change quickly, but in a response to lifestyle changes, the changes are rather slow.
It does make sense, because some of the cells in our body, they don't turn over so quickly. Like it can take a couple of months, and it depends on the tissues. So it does make sense. So as a consumer, then how often should I aim to take GlycanAge test if I want to track my biological age and potentially improve it over course of time?
So we would usually recommend a time span of no shorter than 3 months. So I mean, you're welcome to do it every month if you're really interested in every single change that you take, that you make. How is it going to affect your GlycanAge? But my guess would be that you would not see very significant results, and then you would get bored or even frustrated. And it really takes some time for these changes to take effect. So usually we would recommend not shorter than 3 months, and the real kinds of effects are going to be visible, for instance, after 6 months. And we have some customers that have repeated their tests on a yearly basis and see a really tremendous differences. For instance, like the difference of 15 years of age within 1 year, of the improvement of their GlycanAge. So there can be really quite substantial changes achieved, but it takes time.
Yes, I think it totally makes sense. And yeah,
there is no quick fix, right?
there is no quick fix, absolutely. I do know that some of the aging biological age calculators take into account the actual chronological age, so it fixates. So if you are, let's say, 50 years old, then at maximum you can get biological age result of, let's say, 20 years old. So you cannot become younger than that, because your chronological age minus 30, let's say, is the maximum difference. It can have such an algorithm within the testing calculation. Does GlycanAge have such a factor in it, or can somebody who is 80 years old, can he or she get a result which says, well, according to your GlycanAge, you are 20 years old young?
Well, specifically, I don't think we had a lot of the customers who were 80 or older. So I actually never saw a result of a 80-year-old person who is 20, but we have seen 60-year-old people who were biologically in their 20s. So, I mean, for us, the limit is that this whole immune system is different when you're a child. So you're not going to get a biological age of being 15 or 5. So that's not going to happen. Our limit is early adulthood. And when it comes to an upper limit, we all the time think we've reached it, and then there is another customer which has, off the scale results, and we need to readjust our scales and reach the maximum.
Yeah. But that's very encouraging, of course, for the customer who was 60 and got the result of 20. It's very motivating factor, I could imagine.
Yeah. It is. And there are some cases like this. Of course, the most frequent case is having a biological age which is close to your chronological age. So typically plus minus 5 years. So this is the most frequent result. But then there are some people who have these drastic differences, even 40 years of age, between their biological age and their chronological age. And this can go in either direction. They can be in their 20s and have a biological age of 70, or be, in their 60s and have a biological age of 20. So we have seen these extreme cases, but they are not so very, very frequent. Most of the people have plus minus 5 years, and then there is a larger group of people who has, let's say, a 10 or 15 years of difference. And this, 20 plus or even 40 plus, these are rather rare events.
Yes. I would like to ask a question about, so if I understood correctly, GlycanAge or glycans, they are, or glycans used in GlycanAge, they are very closely related to our immune functions, because it's immunoglobulin G related glycans. And how do they differ, or are they similar to, for example, C-reactive protein, which you could go to your doctor and get measured in your blood? Because it is usually said to be marker for inflammation in our body, and I think it can detect if you take ultra sensitive CPR. CRP test, then you can actually get like 0.00 accuracy. So you can measure even like even under 1. So it doesn't have to be so coarse value. How do they compare to immunoglobulin G glycans? Do you know that?
Yeah, so there is definitely some correlation between C-reactive protein and IgG glycans. For instance, especially in those cases where there is a pro-inflammatory glycan profile associated with a certain disease, usually, C-reactive protein is also showing that. However, what is specific for glycans and what we were able to observe in several studies is that this GlycanAge profile or IgG glycan profile is changed sometimes even up to 10 years before any disease or before any real symptoms occur. So because C-reactive protein is going to be responding to already present inflammation in your body, so it's going to respond to a problem. And glycans are actually changed already before there is a problem. So they're, more like early birds, early signs that can show you something is going in a wrong direction. It's not there yet. It's not in the wrong direction just yet, but something is shifting towards a wrong direction. And this we've been able to observe, for instance, for cardiometabolic diseases or for diabetes or for rheumatoid arthritis, that we can actually observe changes in glycans up to 10 years before the first symptoms of the disease. Now, the question is, and this is something that we're still trying to answer, are actually some of those changes in glycans the thing that is causing the disease themselves? And for some diseases, this
Yes, exactly. That was my question too.
yeah. So for some diseases, this might actually be true. There are some changes in glycans, for instance, in rheumatoid arthritis, that can be specifically observed on the autoimmune antibodies, attacking the joints. But for some diseases, the situation is not so clear, and the glycans might just be responding to some other molecular process. There is not universal answer for every single type of the disease. But what is universal is that some of these glycans, the glycans that we are measuring, they're going to appear across, almost all the diseases that we've looked at. So they're not very specific to a certain disease or aging process. So they are not a prognostic or a diagnostic marker. They're simply showing this increased biological aging rate, increased inflammation rate, which might lead to a certain disease if it's not stopped. But we don't know in which direction is it going to go. Is it going to be a cardiometabolic disease? Is it going to be, an autoimmune disease? What is going to happen? So we cannot determine which direction it's going to go.
Right. So it is a generic inflammation or low inflammation marker, it sounds like to me. And that's but the fascinating thing which I just learned was that so GlycanAge glycans can respond so much earlier than, let's say, C-reactive protein, because C-reactive protein is actually, it can go up and down quite quickly within hours, days or hours. So there's a very big difference there, I think. And another thing you mentioned, so can glycans be actually cause? It can be sometimes cause of some diseases, and the answer is that we are not sure about that yet. So that's how I understand. But I think that's a fascinating area of research, and I truly hope that in the future we learn more about glycans' actual influence on our health, not as just as measurement, but as perhaps like intervention, in that sense, that maybe we can target at glycans to prevent lifestyle diseases. That would be a fascinating research area, I think.
Yeah, this is something that we're also very interested in and that we're pursuing.
Yeah. So we another thing I'm very curious to know is, so you already explained how glycans can be so much earlier warning sign than, let's say, C-reactive protein. But comparing glycan or GlycanAge with other biological age tests, because I think people are thinking thinking that well, there are so many different tests to take, and of course each of them can be expensive financial. It's a financial commitment, and the purpose of tracking whatever it is, biological age or something else, is to track. So it has to be repeated over a course of time, because if you do it just once, then it is not as valuable as if you have done it over a course of time. So then, of course, it means another financial commitment. So it's very important, I think, to choose the right kind of test to commit in. For example, it's just my anecdotal personal story, but I have done a couple of genetic tests. But in hindsight, I actually do think that I could have spent my money a little bit wiser or better, because DNA tests they're interesting, but there's nothing I can do about it. That's if I know something, that's it, and there is no action to be taken. Or maybe you could say that I could act upon some known factor or some SNPs or something, but still I think genetic testing and how genes affect your health, it's quite early in the research. So they're always conflicting information. And so in terms of biological age testing, would you see GlycanAge as an independent, like stand-alone biological age test, or do you think it can complement other biological tests, like let's say epigenetic testing or blood biomarker testing? How would you position GlycanAge?
So I think, well, first of all, if you're just asking about the biological age, I think GlycanAge can do it very, very well by itself. I think it's excellent in doing it by itself. But it really depends on the type of the question and the type of the action that you want to do. For instance, as I mentioned before, the both positive and the negative side of GlycanAge is that this change is seen across a huge number of the diseases, right? So, we cannot tell you as yet, we cannot tell you in which direction it's going to go. This is something that we're interested in, and when we're interested in finding, maybe specific glycan structures which are changed in some types of the diseases, so that in the future, we can maybe have some more diagnostic value from this, or pre-diagnostic value. So right now, maybe there is some value in combining GlycanAge with other tests, like blood markers or stuff like that, which could tell you, if you receive a bad GlycanAge test, in which direction to look. Of course, there is also always family history, personal history, and so on. So all of these are factors where, like an educated medical care professional can tell you, for you, maybe there is a heightened risk for, this or that type of the disease if your biological aging continues to be increased as it is. But right now, I think there is no harm in combining to something like, standard blood tests or, like the C-reactive protein that you mentioned and things like that. I think there can be, at this point, some additional value to it. And if we are working on, trying to find a more specific correlations between certain types of the diseases, but right now, I think it's also a good thing that it's detecting this whole broad range of potential issues, but we cannot direct you in which direction, right?
Yes. So if the GlycanAge is correlated with generic inflammation, is GlycanAge also correlated with all-cause mortality in that case? Can we think in that way too? So the higher your GlycanAge, the higher the risk of dying from whatever the cause is, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very, very difficult question to answer. And it's, of course, something that we've been tackling for a long, long time, right? And most likely, yes. But that's a very, very difficult question to answer because, causes of death can also be related to how well a certain country has medical care, or how well the medical care is approachable for different individuals, and all of these factors affect these studies. So for instance, we can see that in more developed countries, this relation is not necessarily so strong as it is in the countries which don't have so, widely acceptable, distributed medical care and something like this. So
Right.
it really depends on so many factors, like the level of medical care, also the pollution, the stress level that people are in. And this is a very, very complex issue to answer. And I don't think that any biological measure test can really, at this point, design such a study that would eliminate all the other factors. You would really need to, put people in the lab in controlled conditions. So I think this can be answered in lab animals, and this is something that we're pursuing. But for humans, when it comes to answering this question, it's so complex, and the answer that you find in a certain laboratory animal is not going to necessarily completely transition to a human.
Yeah, I understand completely. But that's a really fascinating future area of research, of course. When, as a consumer, if I take GlycanAge test, I think, and whatever result I'm going to get, I thought it was quite encouraging to hear that you said most of the people actually will see GlycanAge, which is within plus minus maybe 5 of their chronological age, because it really sounds like GlycanAge is accurately measuring what your biological age could be, but there can be variations as well depending on lots of factors. So if I get a result, whatever it is, but I think usual reaction is whatever the result is, I want to improve it. I want to become 10 years younger or 20 years younger or whatever it is. Or if you already are very good result, I want to maintain it. So what an actionable plan one can make based on the result of GlycanAge result? What are, for example, what improves your GlycanAge?
Yeah. So right now we have a number of studies dealing with this, and we already have a team of specialists and professionals which we're constantly building, and also trying to include more of the professionals, more of the people which could really look at the individual from all sides. And the things which we know have effect are, for instance, weight loss in obese people. We know that exercise, for instance, we know that it affects the immune system on all levels, for instance, starting from the number of immune cells which are produced, glycans on the cells, and so on and so on. But for exercise, it is not so clear, how much exercise, which type of exercise, and for which groups of people it is going to be beneficial. So this is something that we're working on, trying to answer. Can we find specific groups of people for which, for instance, moderate or high intensity exercise is going to be beneficial? Because what we found so far, for instance, is that in young, healthy males, this very this pulse sprint, so very intense training with a sufficient recovery time, had a positive effect on their GlycanAge. But for instance, in medium-aged women, so middle-aged woman, young and middle-aged woman, very intense training combined with a calorie restriction, which is something women very often do. They do these periods of very intense training with calorie restriction. This actually had a negative effect. It had an effect on increasing their inflammatory potential and biological age, which then basically reversed after recovery. And this is something extremely interesting, and we're constantly doing more research and finding some surprising facts like this, that sometimes people actually think that they're doing the best for themselves and they're not achieving it. So for now, we do have some answers how this can be done better, and we're also doing many more studies, and including different specialists such as nutritionists, professional trainers, healthcare professionals, medical doctors, and building a whole team that could look at an individual and say, what is the best course of action for this specific individual, because it's going to differ. It's going to differ whether you're a middle-aged woman or a young man or for different type of people, even in the same age and sex group, it is going to be different. So there is no simple answer.
No, but I think what you just mentioned was extremely interesting to me. So you mentioned that this, for me, it sounded like this extreme kind of stress. So the calorie restriction and high impact intensity exercise combined had a negative impact on. So it increased your glycan age, and in a way it may be surprising, but on the other hand, I think it makes sense because
Yes.
I have read an article which it said fit but not healthy. So that means like elite athletes who are training very, very hard all the time and probably also eating in a very specific, maybe calorie restricted way. They can be very performance. If you think about the performance, they are very fit. But if they are not necessarily healthy. So fitness does not equal being
Exactly.
healthy all the time. And I think it is the same for because your example was about the women, the same as for the beauty. So beautiful but not healthy. Even the beauty is supposed to represent the state of health. But you go on a diet, very restrictive diet, and then you exercise really hard to lose weight. You may lose weight and temporarily maybe look more beautiful or more perform better, but in the longer run maybe your health is being damaged. So that is a very extremely, I think, interesting aspect. So that is not the way to go. That's what I hear. If you want to increase your glycan or decrease your glycan age and better to be healthy, but I know that there was some specific correlation between glycanage and hormones, specifically
Mhm.
estrogen. Could we maybe discuss a little bit about how estrogen can impact to improve your glycanage?
Yeah, so this is basically something that we noticed both, in some states. There are specifically altered hormonal states. For instance, the thing which first comes to mind is menopause. So women and men don't actually have the same curve of aging. So for men, there is this, very straight curve that just, goes up their biological age. But for
Increases,
women,
yes.
yeah, but for women, there is this, period of slower aging, and then there is this very fast period of aging around the time of the menopause, and then it again slows down. And this is actually reflective in their hormonal state, right? Especially in their estrogen levels. And this was, one of the first indications that actually this biological aging is connected to the hormonal level. And then there are also things like, during the pregnancy, the biological aging almost kind of reverses. You're getting younger during the pregnancy, biologically younger. And this is
Yes.
also something that is affected by the hormones because, for instance, up to a couple of weeks postpartum, when there is a drastic change in the hormones, this effect is reverted. And this can also be seen in, for instance, in some diseases which are typically age-related diseases, but also present in some younger people, for instance, like rheumatoid arthritis. Women that suffer from rheumatoid arthritis often have an improvement or even, complete absence of this disease during the pregnancy, and then there can be a rapid return of the disease in the period postpartum. So it's a very, very interesting correlation, and it is something that in a recent interventional study we were actually able to prove that by changing the hormonal status of women or certain additions of the hormones, we can indeed change their biological age. And other authors have also shown that this is not true only for women, but that actually, things like adding certain hormonal hormones or even these phytohormones can also affect men. So they don't necessarily need to be human hormones. They can even be, plant-based. So there are also some effect on the glycans of men, for instance, that eat a lot of the soy and things like that. So it is a very, very interesting relationship, and for sure, hormones are, here crucial players in determining the biological aging. And we actually have on the 22nd of July, we will have a GlycanAge lecture devoted specifically to the, how hormones are changing IgG glycosylation and how they are connected. And so if you're interested in finding out more about it, please stop by, because this could be a whole, 2 hours lecture, not just 1 hour lecture about how this is related. And there
I will definitely. So, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I sign up for that on the GlycanAge website? Or where can I find more information about that?
On our GlycanAge website, and contact them, and they will send you a link how to join our lectures. And there will be
I will definitely join.
Yeah, there will be even a young specialist who just finished her PhD in the influence of estrogen and hormones on IgG glycans. So it will be a very interesting topic.
It truly is. So I will definitely listen to that seminar. But if I understood correctly, is it specifically estrogen, even for men? It's an estrogen which seems to have positive impact on glycans, even
Yes,
for men.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is truly fascinating, because usually men tend to not avoid, of course, because they produce estrogen in their body, but not seems to care so much about their estrogen level, right? They are always like increase testosterone. That's very hot topic for guys, but estrogen, they seems to like feel like not really. But it can actually have a huge impact on men's health. It sounds like, based on the research on glycans.
Yeah, there is a reason why, we always talk about keeping hormones in balance. With hormones, this balance is crucial, and this balance is drastically and quickly changed in the menopause, during the natural course of aging. And already through this, we can see, what a drastic effect, just shifting the balance in hormones can have. And we can also see that, hormonal replacement therapies and different therapies that are designed to help women throughout this perimenopausal and menopausal period can actually, have beneficial effect, not on their only on their overall, feeling of well-being, but also possibly on even postponing some age-related diseases and things like that. So this is something that we're also working on too. And this is our area of interest. We're also now pursuing to determine meno-age marker, a marker that would specifically be designed to tell women if they're close to the menopause.
Yeah, it is extremely interesting area, I think. The glycans, are they also related to some, are there also genetic factors that impact the glycans? Do we know that? So some genetic predisposal maybe for certain glycan tendencies?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, there is a genetic component to it. So different research papers actually found that it was somewhere between 40 and 50% on average, the genetic component in the composition of glycans in plasma or in immunoglobulin G. And, this is to be expected, because there are many actually genes which determine, certain appearance of certain glycans and things like that. But it's not so straightforward as it is for proteins. You don't have a specific template that if you read on this template you're going to create this structure of protein. For glycans, it's more like this whole group of genes which is going to affect the assembling and the processing and all of this cascade. It's not so straightforward, but yes, for sure there is a genetic component which by different studies has been found to be roughly between 40 and 50%. So that is affected by the genes.
Right. So you can basically affect more than half of what glycan. So that's also encouraging thing. But there are some genetic components as well. And yeah, okay, that's another interesting thing. And one thing I wanted to ask, do you have any sleep related data? So does sleep affect glycans? Has there been any such study?
Well, there are some things that we've looked at, and first I need to tell you that for sure sleep affects immune system. So there are many studies which show that sleeping and immune system are very, very tightly related. And one of the first signs that you can see is, for instance, when you are getting sick, maybe even before the symptoms occur, you're feeling very, very tired. And people that are suffering from chronic diseases often report feeling this very chronic, having this chronic feeling of tiredness. So there is a very tight, connection between sleep and the immune system. So for sure, there is a correlation, certain correlation between sleep and glycans, but how exactly do they change? This is, something that we're still looking into. But yes, there is definitely a connection between immune system and sleep and the amount of sleep. But interestingly, I just recently read this one paper which also shows that different people can have also different genes which affect how long do they need to sleep to rebalance their bodies. So some people maybe need to sleep only 5 hours while others need to sleep 9 hours. And this is also defined by other genes which are not directly affecting immune system or glycans. But of course, this genetic component is also going to affect how much of the sleep you need to be healthy. So it's a very, very extremely interesting topic, and it's something that we are also going to pursue more in the future.
Yes, it is, and especially because I think many biohackers today they track their sleep and they go deep in. They want to go deep in, like my REM phase was so and so minutes this tonight, and my deep sleep was, and they get those different phases, and also when quite a deep detailed analysis, and I think it's quite interesting to see if there is a correlation between deep sleep and glycans and the REM sleep and the glycan or something. That I think that would interest many people, I could imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one thing which, if I can comment, this was very interesting,
Sure.
in this article that I read, is that actually, people who are genetically predisposed for having a rather shorter sleep, they often thought they were suffering from some disturbances or something, and they tried hard to sleep longer but just couldn't achieve it. And it was interesting that actually this shorter sleep didn't have such an effect on their health, and actually by trying to force themselves to sleep longer, they were actually doing something counterproductive for their bodies. So I think this is something that is again going to need to be examined on an individual basis. And again, maybe there is a value here in combining, what you said, like these certain genetic markers. If you feel that there is a problem in certain area, and you got a bad GlycanAge result, maybe you can go back and examine your genetic predisposition for something and ask, is this where the problem might lie? So again, there is maybe here a value in combining those two types of information, because genetic predisposition does not equal, that thing happening in your life. And I think
Yep,
this
I
would be.
absolutely agree. I think what probably people can benefit the most is to if you can triangulate the weakest link in your health. So because that's where it is going to break. So if you can detect that this is the weakest link in my health circle, let's say, then then cross check using GlycanAge and maybe genetic test and see, oh, this is maybe why, and maybe this is the right intervention. It can really give you the right clues to the right actions. I totally agree with that. So that's that's extremely interesting an area. And I also wanted to ask, so since glycans are, we just focused on IgG glycans today because we mainly talked about GlycanAge, but glycans, as you in the beginning mentioned, are all over our body, and there are lots of glycans in our body. And what would be, how would you imagine the future applications and utilizations for glycans in the future? It's a very big question, I know, but how would you maybe like to see that, or how would you fantasize, imagine the future for glycans?
So I think it's in line with a lot of the topics that we talked about. I think glycans, there is still some technology that needs to be developed to really bring the glycans up there, with the proteins and, DNA sort of specific diagnostic markers, because there are not such, easily applicable machines right now that you can just, bring to certain, healthcare office, and you can, just drop a blood there and get measures of glycans. This is something that needs to be developed technologically, and this is something that I would like to see being developed in the next, hopefully, couple of years. And then we will be at the point where we can actually start, using glycans as predictive markers, maybe for certain types of diseases. Maybe we will even be able to do, like you mentioned, specific interventions to increase certain proportion of glycans and thereby improve our general health. Or, glycans are also very present in things like breast milk and stuff like that. So maybe we can, by knowing much more about the composition of good composition of glycans in breast milk and things like that, maybe we can improve, like formulas for the newborns and stuff like that. So I think there is a huge potential application also in the medicine, because today a lot of the medicines which are used for things like cancer and very bad diseases are actually antibodies, monoclonal antibodies. And we know that glycans change the way antibodies are functioning. So by going into deeper analysis of how maybe we can, play with the glycans on those antibodies to make them the most effective and, best target the disease that we're actually aiming for. So applications are countless. We just need, I think, more technology to get there and more research to get there. But I know there are a number of people who are getting more and more interested in glycans, and hopefully we can also help spread the word about glycans so that they reach this point faster, because the potential is huge.
Yeah, sure. Just one thing, that was such an interesting thing you mentioned about the human milk and the glycans in it. Are they actually human milk oligosaccharides? Are they glycans? Because I got interested in human milk oligosaccharides it's totally different context, but are they actually glycans then?
Well, depending on what your technical definition of glycans is, but yes.
Okay, that's just a side note for myself personally, but very interesting indeed. I know that Marina, that our time is almost over, but are there any final thoughts you would like to share with our listeners, and also could you maybe let our listeners know where they can find? I know that there is Genos, there is GlycanAge, but for both of them, so Genos is for research. It's B2B, right? That's for companies interested in using glycans in their research or in their testing, and GlycanAge is a consumer test kit which is already available. If you want to take your GlycanAge test, if you want to know your biological age through glycans, then that is a site you can go. But for both of them, could you maybe also tell them where you'd like to get reached out?
Yeah, so we have a web page for GlycanAge. So it's our UK-based GlycanAge website, and there you can contact any of the people. There is a simple chat button. You can chat with them immediately, ask questions, or you can send us an email, which is also written on the page, and we would love to answer the questions for you. So if you're interested in collaboration with Genos, you can also contact GlycanAge, because GlycanAge is very tightly connected to Genos, but you can also go to a Genos website. So it's Genos is more research oriented. It's not consumer oriented, but if you're a scientist and would like to collaborate, or maybe professional from this field of developing new methods or something like that, we'd love to hear from you. So you can contact us
Your
on Genos website.
your cat is hello.
Yes.
Maybe he or she needs your attention, and maybe it's a perfect time to finish this interview. That was very cute, cute guest we had in the end. But thank you so much again, Marina, for today. I actually have learned a lot new things about glycans and GlycanAge, and they're truly fascinating. And they're a little bit difficult to comprehend in the beginning. I think when I heard glycans at the first time, I didn't really it really took me a couple times of repeating the listening I was doing. It was an interview I was listening before it really sunk in like okay, what glycans can be, but it still seems to be just so many different depths in this topic. And as you said, I truly hope that many more people discover glycans, and maybe even their own GlycanAge, and because it seems glycans have a very special, unique potentials to help us improve our health now and in the future as well.
Yeah.
So thank you again.
Thank you.